looking to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, good evening. I'm Gila Pablo from Thailand Bureau, and welcome to ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. Landslides and flooding killed 13 people as heavy rain from an approaching tropical storm washed the southern Philippines on Friday. A Thai plastic surgeon on Thursday described drinking pond water to survive during 3 weeks of captivity at the hands of gun-toting kidnappers in Mali. Southeast Asian foreign ministers said they were even more determined to solve the political crisis in Myanmar during talks in Indonesia ahead of the ASEAN Leaders Summit in November. The 5th ASEAN Inclusive Business Summit concluded today. The theme of the two-day hybrid event was Together ASEAN IB, Inclusive Business Enabling Environment. First, in our news, landslide and flooding killed 13 people as heavy rain from an approaching tropical storm lashed the southern Philippines on Friday. The spokesman and civil defense chief for the regional government said 10 of the dead were from the flood-hit town of Batu Blas Sinsuat on Mindanao Island, Nagib Sinarimbo. He said rescuers in rubber boats retrieved another 3 bodies in the neighboring town of Datu Udin Sinsuat as they combed the flooded areas around Cotabato City. However, rescue teams, including military units, were also checking other areas where flooding and landslides had been reported. Heavy rain began late Thursday in the region, which is under Muslim self-rule after decades of separatist armed rebellion. The State Weather Office in Manila said it was partly caused by Tropical Storm Nalgae far to the northeast. Nalgae was headed towards the northern Philippines, where the Civil Defense Office said nearly 5,000 people were evacuated from flood and landslide-prone areas ahead of an expected landfall on Saturday or Sunday. A Thai plastic surgeon on Thursday described drinking pond water to survive during 3 weeks of captivity at the hands of gun-toting kidnappers in Mali. Noparat Ratana Waraha, who also runs a popular YouTube channel where he posts travel clips, returned to Thailand after being released on a payment of a reported $150,000 ransom. The 49-year-old was back at work just a day after flying back to the kingdom and recounted the dramatic moment. He was seized while driving from Burkina Faso into Mali with a driver and guide. Let's watch this.
เราก็เลยสบายใจผมก็นั่งหลับครับผมก็นั่งหลับอยู่บนรถระหว่างทางที่เดินทางไปแล้วไม่ได้ระวังอะไรเลยนะฮะแล้วอยู่ๆเนี่ยก็ต้องบอกว่าได้ยินเสียงปืนนะฮะดังปังปังปังปังผมหลับอยู่ผมก็สะดุ้งตื่นมาผมก็ถามใจว่าเฮ้ยเกิดอะไรขึ้นเขาก็บอกว่าเราถูกยิงนะครับซึ่งผมก็ไม่ทราบว่าถูกยิงจากตรงไหนอะไรไงเพราะเราสลึมสลืออยู่แล้วตื่นมาเรากำลังพักผ่อนอยู่นะฮะแล้วก็เขาก็บังคับให้เราลงจากรถนะครับเหมือนในหนังนะครับเหมือนในหนังคือบรรยากาศเหมือนในหนังเลยก็คือเขาก็วิ่งมาพร้อมกับปืนผมจำไม่ได้ว่ากี่คนแล้วถามว่าตำแหน่งเนี่ยผมก็บอกได้ไม่ชัดว่ามันตรงไหนชี้ได้ไม่ชัดนะครับแล้วเขาก็
Helping him through was his homemade survival kit, a plastic bag containing mosquito-repellent armbands and herbal inhalers popular in Thailand. In the 3rd week of captivity, he was allowed to use the phone to speak to his mother and girlfriend, who spoke to the kidnappers to hear their ransom demands. It has not been confirmed who paid the ransom, but the Thai police and foreign office helped to organize his return. Noparat said that while he did not feel immediately traumatized by his experience, he thought he would need professional counseling. The United Nations recently urged action in Mali, Burkina Faso, and neighboring Niger following the volatile security situation, which has seen peacekeepers and civilians attacked by terror groups. The three countries have struggled against a jihadist insurgency that has killed thousands of civilians, police, and troops, while around 2 million people have fled their homes. Southeast Asian foreign ministers said they were even more determined to solve the political crisis in Myanmar during talks in Indonesia on Thursday ahead of the ASEAN Leaders Summit in November. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the military coup in February last year, but despite its expressions of concern, efforts by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations have yet to bear any fruit. Let's watch this.
Para Menlu ASEAN menyampaikan concern dan kekecewaan terhadap tidak adanya kemajuan signifikan dari pelaksanaan 5 Point of Consensus. Sangat jelas kekhawatiran ini dan bahkan beberapa negara menyampaikan rasa frustrasinya terhadap tidak adanya kemajuan ini. Alih-alih ada kemajuan, situasi bahkan dikatakan memburuk. Bahasa yang dipakai oleh Chair adalah deteriorating and worsening. Dan ini merupakan sebenarnya refleksi dari apa yang disampaikan oleh para Menteri Luar Negeri ASEAN.
ASEAN tidak pernah membahas tentang pengeluaran Myanmar. Tidak ada pembahasan mengenai expulsion of Myanmar. Pembahasan selama ini selalu didasarkan atas premis ASEAN itu tetap 10. Myanmar keputusannya adalah merekomendasikan supaya di ASEAN Summit mereview implementation of the 5 Point Consensus by the Naipitau authorities. Jadi dalam konteks ini sebenarnya pertemuan tadi berlangsung.
ASEAN should not be discouraged, but even more determined to help Myanmar to bring about a peaceful solution, according to Cambodian Foreign Minister Prak Sokhon after the emergency meeting at the bloc's secretariat in Jakarta. Myanmar's junta had declined to send a non-political figure to the meeting. More than 2,300 people have been killed in the Myanmar military's brutal crackdown on dissent after the coup, according to a local monitor. Junta leader Min Aung Hlaing has not been invited to the ASEAN Leaders Summit in Cambodia next month for the second year in a row. And Myanmar's top diplomat Wuna Mong Bin was excluded from ministerial talks in February and August. The United States had urged strong action at Thursday's meeting. Daniel Kritenbrink, the top U.S. diplomat for East Asia, said at an event in Washington that the junta was leading the complete destruction of all the progress made over the last decade as Myanmar transitioned to democracy.
Look, Myanmar or Burma, intractable is the right word. I'm glad you used it. This is tragic what's taken place. The complete destruction of all the progress made over the last decade. The brutality of the regime, wantonly killing, murdering civilians, bombing schools, executing activists, beheading teachers. I think what you'll see from the United States of America at the East Asia Summit is a very forceful call to do more to apply pressure to the regime. I think we have some practical ideas in mind. We're always going to consult with our ASEAN friends. We were gratified that ASEAN issued the 5-point consensus. I know that when we were in Bangkok in July, Secretary Blinken expressed some concern and frustration that we haven't made much, if any, progress on the 5-point consensus. I will state that wasn't meant as a criticism of our friends in ASEAN. It was meant as a statement of fact. Nothing that ASEAN has done or the United States or anyone else has done has so far turned the tide and improved the situation on the ground. That's why I think, again, I'll reiterate, on the part of the United States of America, I think we will take additional steps to put pressure on the regime to try to stop the killing.
And meanwhile, Tom Andrews, a special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar, said, I quote, there are 150,000 Rohingya that are confined to de facto internment camps in Rakhine State. Right now, there is a looming food crisis. Let's watch this.
There are 150,000 Rohingya that are confined to de facto internment camps in Rakhine State. Right now, there is a looming food crisis. The economy has collapsed, the healthcare system has collapsed, and there's a dramatic increase in childhood malnutrition. The incomprehensible is the reaction of the people of Myanmar to the fact that the pattern of the response of the international community to this horror has not changed. And because of that, there is not the requisite pressure necessary to generate any kind of change in the behavior of the military junta. For the pattern of the horror to change, the pattern of the international response has to change, and it is incomprehensible to the people of Myanmar why that change is not happening. And as the horror continues inside of Myanmar, the pressure of people literally crossing the border, running for their lives, increases exponentially. I've been in the region, I've talked to many who risked everything to get themselves and their families out. No one who has left that country running for their lives should be sent back into danger.
North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles on Friday. The South's military said the latest in a blitz of launches that Washington and Seoul have warned could culminate in Kim Jong-un conducting another nuclear test. The launch comes as South Korea and the U.S. conclude 12 days of amphibious naval joint military drills, and just ahead of the Monday start of major combined air drills that will involve more than 200 U.S. and South Korean fighter jets. Such drills infuriate Pyongyang, which sees them as rehearsals for invasion. North Korea has this month fired multiple artillery barrages into a maritime buffer zone that was set up in 2018 as a way of reducing tensions with the South during a period of ill-fated diplomacy. It also announced it had staged what it called tactical nuclear drills that stimulated showering the South with new capable missiles. Now, Canada, with the backing of United States, will seek to join the U.S.-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, Foreign Minister Melanie Joly announced Thursday. At a joint news conference with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Joly said the two countries aim to further align our approaches in the Indo-Pacific. The Biden administration launched the new trade partnership earlier this year to reinforce its presence in a region that felt cold-shouldered when Donald Trump was president. Trump's isolationist America First policy saw him yank the United States from the ASEAN-focused trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a move criticized as ceding ground to China in an economically crucial part of the world. Canada is a TPP member. Blinken said the United States would support Canada, a fellow Pacific nation, joining this framework, and in the coming months will consult with other members on Canada's application. The World Health Organization said tuberculosis case numbers increased last year for the first time in more than 20 years, fueled by the COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted access to diagnosis and treatment. Teresa Pasiva, the director of the UN Health Agency's Global TB program, said it was now a pivotal moment in the fight against the disease. Let's listen in.
We are releasing global tuberculosis report this year with the information from more than 200 countries and with very concerning, unfortunately, messages to the world and to the community. According to our new report, 10.6 million people fell ill with the tuberculosis. Its increase in compare with the last year at least 4.5%. It's significant. 1.6 million people died from tuberculosis, and these are exactly, unfortunately, these more than 4,000 deaths per day. The number of deaths are gradually increasing, and it's extremely concerning. These trends should be stopped. It is a result of the limited access to treatment, to diagnostics, to the testing, in other words, and continued transmission. People are unfortunately dying, at least 50% of them, in absence of access, timely access to the life-saving treatment. COVID-19 pandemic, which is ongoing, is responsible for this sobering situation with the tuberculosis epidemic. Due to its impact, immediately in 2020, we see sharp drops in TB notification. Notification means people were not diagnosed with TB, services were not accessible, available, and this was really very concerning drop. 20% of the services globally, its average, were not reachable. But if we look from country to country, especially in the high-burden country, in some of the countries, even more than 40% of the services were closed. Delayed access, interruptions in the treatment, and this all resulted in the worsening global TB situation and situation in the high TB burden countries. Drug-resistant tuberculosis is the most severe form of tuberculosis, and unfortunately this time we see also increase for the first time over many years in the number of drug-resistant TB cases. This dangerous trend should be again stopped through provision of the treatment using WHO recommendations, fully oral, injectable-free, home-based treatment, 3-4 times shorter as it was even 4 years ago, and with much better treatment outcomes and much safer. This is the way out from this situation. It's a disease of the poorest people, and equity, stigma, and discrimination are huge issues for this kind of situation. And TB funding was limited even before COVID-19 pandemic. We have less than 40% of the funding we need for the comprehensive TB response. WHO, together with the partners and civil society, is strongly requested for urgent actions and provision access to essential healthcare services, community-based primary healthcare-based services. In other words, access to testing of tuberculosis and its treatment according to WHO latest guidelines. TB prevention is another important task. We should protect those who are vulnerable from the development of the disease. We should at least increase in 2-3 times to the current level of the financing. We are poorly, chronically underfunded. I mean, TB programs, TB services, and the needs of the most vulnerable and poorest should be addressed urgently.
In yet another ominous climate change warning, atmospheric levels of the 3 greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, all reached new record highs in 2021, according to a new report from the World Meteorological Organization. WMO's Greenhouse Gas Bulletin reported the biggest year-on-year jump in methane concentrations in 2021, since systematic measurements began nearly 40 years ago. Take a look.
And here we are talking about things that are happening in real atmosphere. We have a network of 150 stations worldwide where we measure concentrations of main greenhouse gases. It's carbon dioxide, it's methane and nitrous oxide, which are the three most important gases. And in all of those three gases, we have again broken new records. So we haven't seen any improvement in real atmosphere so far. Important to get the whole G20 family on board because that group is responsible for 80% of the global emissions.
Meanwhile, Indonesian President Joko Widodo says the biggest Muslim majority country is ready to help facilitate reconciliation of factions in Palestine. He made the statement when receiving Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Chitaye at the Presidential Palace in Bogor, West Java. Let's watch this.
Oleh karena itu, proses rekonsiliasi perlu terus didorong dan Indonesia siap memfasilitasi rekonsiliasi faksi-faksi yang ada di Palestina. Saya juga menyampaikan dukungan Indonesia agar Palestina menjadi anggota penuh di PBB.
كما تعلم وكما تحدثنا فإن هناك برنامج استيطاني مكثف تقوم به حكومة إسرائيل وهذا التعزيز الاستيطان هو بصراحة يجرف حل الدولتين ولذلك كل من يتحدث عن حل الدولتين عليه أن يعمل من أجل حل الدولتين ولا يدمر حل الدولتين كما تقوم بذلك إسرائيل.
According to the Jakarta Post, 2 memorandums of understanding were signed between the two leaders at the Bogor Palace in West Java. One focusing on Indonesia's continued humanitarian assistance, while the other was on providing human capacity building assistance for the establishment of Palestinians' independent drug and food authority. According to Antara News, the humanitarian assistance from the Indonesian government and People for Palestine has included building a hospital in Gaza.
And the state of Palestine.
Meanwhile, the 5th ASEAN Inclusive Business Summit concluded today. The theme of the 2-day hybrid event was Together ASEAN IB, or Inclusive Business Enabling Environment. In his opening remarks, Cambodian Senior Minister of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation, or MISTI, PT Seta Pandita Champrasid, mentioned that with the vision of Samdech Teko Hansen, Prime Minister of Cambodia, to transform and continue the safeguarding measures for the national development from all forms of risk and uncertainties. We identify inclusive business, or IB, as one of the most rewarding ways to complement our endeavor to reduce poverty. The summit discussed the implementation of guidelines for the promotion of inclusive business in ASEAN, particularly on IB investment incentives, policy instruments, and support mechanisms. Since 2020, Cambodia has been a leading country in ASEAN in promoting inclusive business. In 2021, Cambodia launched its first IB landscape study and held its first IB accreditation, recognizing 18 IB companies. In August 2022, the royal government of Cambodia issued a decision on the establishment of the IB steering group under the leadership of MISTI, with the involvement of representatives from government agencies and business associations to lead the IB initiative in Cambodia. And as usual, my habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And again, this is Zila Pablo from Thailand Bureau, and we live in extraordinary times.